Good evening and welcome to another edition of Black and Azul. Charles Wollin coming to you here for episode number 43. We are getting older. We are getting up there. Joining me today, of course, Jamon Moore, and he runs the website, the Quakes Epicenter. You can find him on Twitter at jmoorequakes. And also, we have Alex Morgan, who runs the website Quakes Talk, and you can find him on Twitter at Quakes_talk. Let's talk about the recent match that took place on Friday night. The Quakes took on Seattle Sounders, their first match in the group in the MLS is Back tournament, a 0-0 draw. And some are saying, point earned. Some are saying points dropped. They outshot Seattle. But the players were jubilant. The energy level was there. And Alex Morgan, your initial thoughts on the draw on Friday evening?
Yeah, I think it was a good result for the Quakes. I think Seattle were always going to be their toughest challenge in this Group B. And they came away with the result. They had a strong defensive performance, which bodes really well for them, considering that their defense was one of their main weaknesses earlier this season. And I think it was a very tactical battle, and the term tactical battle is pretty coded. It's in part to say that it was lacking in pure entertainment value, being a scoreless draw, not much drama, few clear-cut chances. But I think it also revealed a lot about the Quakes and a lot about Seattle as well. And about what we should expect from this tournament going forward. So that's what made it worth watching.
Jamon Moore?
Yeah, I mean, I see it kind of similar to the way Alex described it. I think if you had said before the game, hey, you're going to get a point and you're going to hold Seattle scoreless and walk away with that result, I think Matias Almeida would be like, yeah, I'll take it, because I think he needed to see the defense step up. He wanted to get Judson back on the pitch and see what that looked like. He needed to see if Guram Kasia recovered himself from the, let's face it, kind of a bit of a debacle against Minnesota United. And, I thought overall, they stepped up to that. It's hard to say how much the defense had to work, because the Quakes really kind of dominated control of the ball throughout the game, and other than the camera peeling away for a bit and then coming back, and all of a sudden Raul Ruidiaz is on a breakaway and you have no idea how it happened, which bugs the fire out of me. I don't know about the rest of you when that kind of shoddy camera work is happening. But other than that, there really wasn't much from a Seattle attacking perspective. You could sense that they were going to try to hit on the counter, but never felt like Jordan Morris and some of their offensive weaponry really got that engaged in the game. Kudos to Daniel Vega for a great stop on the Ruidiaz shot and hanging on to it, not giving up a rebound in that situation. But yeah, it was overall a quiet game, and that's to the Quakes, I think, advantage. I think it builds some confidence from the defensive side, and now they can look at, okay, how do we step this up on the offensive side? Because if you look ahead at the other teams, they're probably going to sit back quite a bit like Seattle did.
Yeah, lots of storylines specifically from that game. Also, I think, a little bit of the Western Conference knowing each other a little bit as well kind of played into the Quakes' hands, especially given the history of the two matches in the previous year, going up and tying them 2-2 and then losing in the last few minutes in San Jose as well. Let's go ahead and throw up the expected goal chart and chat a little bit through this. Obviously, the Quakes did outshoot Seattle. They did dominate possession as well. Again, 0-0 the score line. Jackson Ewell going close. Good save by the Seattle goalkeeper. Fry on that. But Jamon, walk us through kind of the XG here.
Yeah, so American Soccer Analysis saw the game a bit differently than Opta did. Opta gave the edge on the expected goals to Seattle. I think San Jose, the Rios opportunity, American Soccer Analysis expected goals model rated that a bit higher than Opta did, and kind of gave them the edge. But overall, you can see here, the expected goal step plot gives the Earthquakes a 42% chance of winning the game, whereas Seattle only had 27% chance. And you can say, yeah, that could be a bit of points dropped, but like I said, I think if you get a chance to hold Seattle scoreless for a game, you're probably going to take that every time, and then see if you can find a way to get one in the net. And to be fair, Seattle was packing it in, quite a bit and trying to force the Quakes to break them down. And I think we predicted that before the match, and it, despite Taylor Twelleman protest to the contrary, it played out exactly the way I expected. And what was a little bit kind of different, that Bobby Warshaw, after our conversation on the last Black and Azul, reached out to me in the middle of the game, and he noticed that there was a bit of a change to the way that the man marking system was being done up top. And the thing that he pointed out, which I didn't really get a chance to go back and confirm like I wanted, was that Vako was more of a part of the initial part of the pressure than he typically is. He was on the center back on his side. Rios stayed to the center back on the right. And that meant that in the middle, Judson was putting the pressure on the defensive midfielder in the middle. So that Vako part is a bit different. And when we heard from Danny Houston that there was going to be a little bit of a change, I think we're going like, oh, there's going to be some great new offensive strategy. And probably what he just meant by that was that we are going to put pressure on in our initial press in a slightly different way than people have seen before. The theory that Bobby Warshaw put out there about why that was because on the same side as Vako, you had Christian Roldan, and now Roldan has this habit of always drifting inside. And so it seems like Almeida felt he was pretty safe to have Vako do the pressing that he was doing without Roldan overloading the side and taking advantage, because he kept moving toward the middle. So I guess they were fairly well scouted by Almeida. It worked out. The Quakes tend to hold the ball in, and Seattle had a hard time playing out. And, other aside from a couple situations, the Quakes did kind of control the match in that way.
Jamon, that was a lot, but I have a couple points to add.
You want a tactical breakdown? I just gave you the tactics, courtesy of Bobby Warshaw, who's not here to defend himself.
To start, I think I'm surprised by the American Soccer Analysis chart, because like Opta, I actually thought that Seattle had the better chances. There was a big jump in the expected goals for the Quakes with that Rios chance, but I thought that Seattle had a couple more dangerous chances with Rui Diaz getting in behind midway through the first half, and then a couple more chances like that late on. Seattle's counterattacking almost worked. I think their counterattacking strategy almost worked. And to be honest, I think they showed the blueprint
working right away, actually.
Mm-hmm.
They almost started the match off with it working right away.
Exactly. That was actually one of the ways in which they were most dangerous early on, was that Morris would play more centrally and allow Nuhu to bomb down the left wing. Yep. And because Tommy Thompson was drawn out of position by Morris, then Espinosa was left chasing Nuhu. And surprisingly, Nuhu was able to outpace him and get in behind a couple times and whip in some dangerous crosses. And I think that was one of the ways in which Seattle showed the blueprint for how to play against the Quakes, how to defeat the Quakes. They played with a deep defensive block. They allowed the Quakes to dominate possession. And what that did was it denied the Quakes the opportunity to play on the counterattack themselves, because that's what the Quakes like doing going forward. They like to play through Christian Espinosa and put balls in behind for him and have him run in behind and use his pace. But he was nullified because he didn't have any space into which to run. And that meant the impetus was on Vako and Rios and Eriksson to unlock space in the middle of the park with short passing and movement. But they weren't able to do that. And I think that was a good bet that Seattle made with that trade-off. And then the other thing that you mentioned, Jamon, was the change up front with Vako. I was actually unimpressed by Vako's work rate in that position. And I guess at this point, that's sort of a tired argument. We've talked on many episodes about Vaco's defensive contributions. But sometimes he would chase between the fullback and the center back and then let him go. And that meant that Seattle's right back had a couple opportunities to run at speed up the wing with no marker, which forced everybody else to adjust and threw the whole man marking system off kilter. So I think that was one of the weak links in San Jose's man marking system.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. And when you saw, most of the play, it was towards Cristian Espinosa. And when Vaco did get on the ball, he was fine a couple of times. But you did notice that the ball kept coming over to that right side consistently. Tommy Thompson, Espinosa, potential overlaps. Espinosa laying it back to Tommy Thompson for the crosses there, and then the change, the switching of the field through the feet of Vaco through the feet of Judson and Jackson Ewell, towards Vaco did not seem to have that same quickness, and maybe that was just a match sharpness issue potentially, and I think that was probably the case. But I do agree with you that Espinosa was far more impressive on the right side than Vaco through the left. Let's talk about kind of the
Charles, can I add briefly? There was one other thing that was actually a little puzzling to me about Vaco that game. It was his positioning. When in possession, Vaco would often push wide and Lima would tuck inside centrally, which made absolutely no sense to me because Vaco is a much more central player than Lima. I don't think he has any business being the widest player. And he was really easy to read in that position because all he was interested in doing was cutting inside. And now Tommy and Espinosa also do that on the right. They rotate and switch positions, one on the wing and one coming inside. And it works well, I think, because Espinosa is naturally a wide player and Thompson is more comfortable playing centrally. And so that rotation helps unstick the defense. But I don't see that movement as having the same advantage with Vaco and Nick Lima on the left. And so one of the things that made me think about was this is the last year of Vaco's contract. And at this stage, I would be surprised if Almeida re-signs him because he just doesn't feel like the type of player that suits this system. Almeida's system demands quick, high-intensity players, and that's just not Vaco. His first instinct is all too often to slow things down. And I think if the Quakes are going to make their attack around Espinosa, then they need more pace and quicker players to launch those breakaways.
Well, this is an opportunity for us to have a little bit of debate, a little bit of disagreement. I actually saw the game a bit differently from that regard. I liked Lima coming inside, and there's a reason for that. If you take a look at when Nick Lima has been the most effective, the highest opportunity chances that Nick Lima has had throughout his careers, the goals he has had, everything has come from the inside. There's a reason that Berhalter wanted him in the center of the pitch in the national team in the situation that he did. I think maybe they wanted to try something there. And I think that if you just keep bringing Vaco inside, what we've seen is that teams mark out Vaco. Vaco doesn't necessarily get out of double teams and things, as well as Cristian Espinosa can, because he lacks the pace and the ability to change speed with the ease at which Espinosa can do it. And I do think Lima's got a bit of that. And I kind of like trying that a bit more, even if that neutralizes Vaco, just to give the defense something different that looks different than the last time the Quakes came down the pitch. And Vaco's on the dribble again, and he dribbles for 25 yards into the middle of the pitch and loses the ball. So, I think changing it up is important. And if that means Vaco has to get out wide and figure out how to bomb and ball inside or something like that, if he gets caught down there, I'm all for it. Now, my personal opinion is this is an opportunity for someone like Cade Cowell. I think we would all like to see more of Cade Cowell. Let's get him in that situation. Let's get him down the wings with his pace on one side. Let's get Espinosa on the other side. And we did get to see Cade Cowell later in the game and, had a chance right at the very end, maybe if he had one-timed it. Maybe could have done something there. But overall, I think he started, and I was sitting on the couch, telling my son, it's time for Cade Cowell, because that back defense was getting very tired, and I wanted to see him run in behind and see if he could make something happen. And it wasn't quite what it was with Minnesota United, but I think he shows a lot of promise still.
And Jim, and my critique wasn't so much about Lima as it was about Vako. I think that it might just be that Vako is the odd man out, and that the Quakes need a player like Cowell there, a winger with more speed. I think that was probably supposed to be Carlos Fierro, but he's been utterly disappointing. He had a brief appearance as a late substitute, but didn't really show anything. As you said, we were talking last week about whether Cade Cowell could play on the left as opposed to the right, where we've seen him previously. And I don't think we saw enough of him to really gauge how he played, but Almeida trusted him on the left. And to me, that says that I'd like to see more of him there against Vancouver.
As soon as he came on, I said, okay, well, now Fierro's going to switch over and he's going to be on the right, and it didn't happen. And Fierro looked kind of lost out there, as he has. So what can you do, though? It's hopefully a long tournament for the Quakes. And, if Christian Espinoza needs a rest, after 70 minutes or so, I think you got to find a way to give it to him.
Want to get to the engine room. Judson, of course, back in the team for his first start of 2020, and he had a little bit of an injury in preseason. And Jackson Ewell and Charlie Davies singing his praises on the MLSsoccer.com site, and the captain, Magnus Eriksson. What did we make of the midfield three? I felt like they controlled the game pretty well, and most of them were all in each other's, took care of each other's roles.
Welcome to live home shows.
Charles, I can take the question. Judson's return was huge. I think that was the key for the Quakes defensively. Everything clicked into place with him as the defensive midfielder, man marking. I think right now for the Quakes, Judson, Ewell, and Eriksson are the right midfield pairing. They weren't able to unlock Seattle going forward, but defensively, it just makes sense. And the only thing that was weird for me was when Judson was substituted for Chris Wondolowski in the second half. And Almeida has a habit of taking Judson off in these situations when the Quakes have a draw or they're holding on to the lead. And it always baffles me to take off one of the most important defensive players. I mean, I guess in this situation, I have to think that means Judson was struggling with his fitness, which makes sense as a midfielder tracking so much ground in the Florida heat. But the fact that he was replaced with a forward seemed like a needless risk. And I actually think that Seattle had a couple chances late on. They had more space and started to push forward more because of that change. And to me, it felt like the Quakes nearly blew it because of that.
Yeah, complete agreement. I would have preferred to see, just bring Wando on for Rios as a lone striker in that situation. Rios ended up going the full match, no subs for him. And, I would have liked to have seen that be the switch. And even if that means that you bring, Luis Fernandez or somebody else you think can kind of hold it down in that six role, again, kind of leaving it to Jackson Ewell to have to play that role, in a situation where you get out with the draw, it might even feel a little bit like a win considering it's the Sounders. I have to disagree. I think I disagree every single time Almeida makes the move, honestly. I know you do too, Charles.
Yeah, it's a strange move to take off kind of the heartbeat, your metronome, as I like to say, player that really does control the game, is able to allow the center backs and the outside backs to stretch the match and be able to provide that spacing. I would probably be in agreement to say that maybe there is some sort of match fitness thing going on there, but we have seen it in the past. It is something that we chat about frequently on the show, and when Judson does get taken off and another attacker comes on, and Jackson and Magnus Eriksson are there to kind of run the show in the middle, but the show is run with all three of them in that mix. For me, for Almeida, I know it might be different. So there's that. What did we make of young Jackson Yueill? I mean, this is a lad that has found his legs under Matias Almeida, and had some tough times under Mikel Stare before Almeida, and Almeida has really made him into a terrific player in my opinion. Alex?
I would agree with everything you said. Defensively, he has been more solid. I think he strikes a good partnership with Judson defensively, and then going forward, I think he works well with Eriksson. They weren't able to unlock Seattle's defense, obviously, but Jackson did have a couple of strikes from long distance, one of which was deflected and nearly went in. It was a good save from Fry. So that's another facet of his game that we haven't seen before, another way in which he's continued to improve.
Yeah, I thought the game started off actually very slow for Jackson Yueill. I hypothesized at the water break that one of the things that Matias wanted to stress in the water break was to find ways to get Yueill on the ball more, because he just wasn't getting any touches at that point. At least it didn't feel like it to me. And what Seattle kept kind of putting him in the situation of doing is dropping back and having to get on the ball. There's a couple times that we saw that Vega was actually playing goal kicks outright, tapping it over to Jackson Yueill, given that, the new rule that you can play the balls in the box now on the goal kicks, and Jackson was having to take it from the back. Well, when he takes it from the back, he's not going to be there when you get the ball up the pitch, where he can potentially use his skills the most effective. So after the water break, it definitely got better. I think that's when we saw some of the more dynamic moments from Jackson. Was after they got the chance to kind of talk that over as a team. I felt like that was an early adjustment they wanted to make, was find ways to get the ball to Jackson more, and it did lift the team a bit at the time.
And I think he actually benefited as well by the players being so tired after the water break, because he plays well when he has more space. He likes to get his head up and play balls in behind. So I think he struggled a bit, given that Seattle sat so deep and didn't give him space to play those passes. He's not as adept at playing the shorter, faster balls through the middle.
And what do we make of Magnus Eriksson, the captain? I see a couple comments on the side here from Jesus Solorio. Terrible performance in Squad Horizon. Why is he captain? But we talk about it, week in, week out on the show, about Magnus Eriksson and about his output and why he's favored by Almeida. It's not the fancy stuff from Magnus Eriksson. It's the little passes, the little short, quick passes, and the change of direction, and the switching of the field, and trying to get in those positions right at the top of the 18 to make a difference, or arriving late in the box. But I thought it was an average performance by Magnus Eriksson. I thought that maybe he could have had another kicked on, and maybe had another opportunity or two to insert himself into the game. I didn't feel like he was 100% switched on, but I thought that was because of the heat and because it was the first match back. But lads, let's reiterate, why is he important to this side?
Yeah, Almeida gave us that insight before. We talked a little bit about it last week. He's what I think from Almeida's perspective, Almeida feels like he is the player that he wants the younger players to emulate in his continuous level of effort. Now, I think we would all agree that Magnus in almost even his best games is kind of a B+ player. But his downside is not too far removed from that. And this game was maybe more of a C+ level type game from him. It wasn't his best, but it's the first game back for everybody. So let's give it a game. He also did have a couple key recoveries in certain situations. His passing wasn't off. He didn't create any bad giveaways or anything like that. So I think saying Magnus just had a bad game is not accurate to what actually happened. The ratings and everything like that, for Magnus in the game were fairly average for him. But we know Almeida is going to have him on the pitch. And one of the reasons I think is because he doesn't run too hot. I think Almeida trusts that he's not going to be the one cramping up. He's going to be able to handle the load, to continuously be able to move. Doesn't need the substitution. He's only got 5 subs. He can't sub everybody. Someone's going to have to stay out there for 100 minutes in the heat. And Magnus is one of the guys that he trusted to do that. And, Magnus showed at the end of the game no additional signs of wear compared to where he was earlier in the match as well. And despite the fact that you might want to see him run a bit hot and be able to show more pace and things like that, that level of consistency has some value to a coach like Almeida. And particularly in this type of situation, tournament situation, being able to trust Magnus for 3 straight games to be able to play 100 minutes is someone's got to be able to do that for Almeida, even if it's, not going to be a Espinoza level effort.
I think the anger with Eriksson is somewhat misplaced. He's Mr. Consistent. He has really good defensive work rate, and he moves the ball really well. But he was never supposed to be the magic number 10 who unlocks the game. That was supposed to be Vako. He's supposed to be the magician. He's supposed to be the one who has the winding dribbles, the creative spark. That's why Vako is the highest played player on the Quakes team. But I think Magnus Eriksson is simply fulfilling his duty and doing that very consistently and very well. And that's why he's still in this team.
Yeah, you can see in the comments, people are very divided on Magnus Eriksson. We've got some bad news for you. Magnus was the English player that we had access to for the pregame press conferences. You're going to get to listen to a bit of Magnus coming up here in just a minute.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about the back line and their efforts. Tommy Thompson, Nick Lima as the 2 outside backs. How did we think that they did?
Yeah, Tommy was one of the early subs, and it was Shea Salinas, and that's not unexpected. I think if you're on the program last week, you heard us talk about how Almeida is looking at Salinas as an outside back right now, and he's going to be getting more time there. And there's not massive differences from what Tommy brings and what Shea brings, to be quite honest. They both have very similar characteristics in many senses. And I think they're kind of at about a similar level too. And I think Almeida is starting to figure that out. And I thought Tommy was fine. I think Lima was asked to do something a little bit different because of the way that Vako was asked to mark and things like that. I don't think either of them had their best games. I don't think even Shea was all that impactful when he came on. But not the best game I don't think for the outside backs overall. But they didn't kill the team, and they did well enough defensively to maintain the clean sheet.
I don't have much more to add. I would say that for the Quakes, I think the main focus should be on the center backs, Kashia and Alanis, because both of them at various points went out with cramps. Right. Almeida said that Alanis, who was actually substituted midway through the second half, had double leg cramps, I believe, but no other serious injury. And then Kashia at the very end of the 90 minutes, even in stoppage time, I think, briefly walked off with some cramps and then had to hurry back onto the field and hobble around a little bit because the Quakes would have been down to 10 men. So I think that for right now for Almeida, that's the bigger concern.
Yeah, you saw them somewhat, in my opinion, I thought that the center back pairing struggled a little bit. I thought while they were able to get on the ball and move it from left to right quite easily, the center back pairing also, when you played balls over the top, Seattle was able to broach the back line. And if not for a few game-saving tackles, and if not for Vega, it could have been 1 or 2 goals potentially conceded. Now, I think that there is plenty of work because this is a new center back pairing. And then there's also, Florian Youngworth, who's knocking on the door to try to get in because he worked his way into the team last season. He's a fan favorite as well. And so I do think that the places are quite competitive in that position, and you can only play 2. So I think that the back line, if they're able to recover and able to be fresh for tomorrow night's match, we'll have to see how they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a lot of commentary about Rios with this game as well. And one of the questions that was posed to him by the press this week, and we've got a quote we'll put up here in a second, but let me just quickly give some background on it. Is he feeling comfortable as a lone striker? And that's a completely fair question. When we saw the footage of Rios prior, when the Quakes were announcing that they were acquiring him, or I think maybe we had a little bit of heads up that they were likely going to be acquiring him, and started looking at some of his footage, he was almost always an underneath type forward. He was like a second forward. He was not really a lone striker, and he would often be able to play on the wings. And so the question was asked to him by one of the press corps as to whether he felt that he was comfortable as a lone striker. And he gave a response in Spanish, which we were able to get a translation of. So why don't we take a look at that quote? You want to take us through it, Charles?
Yeah, I do understand it is my responsibility to be upfront and score goals. That's something I continue to work on. I do have flexibility in dropping back sometimes. I'm looking forward to improving in that position, but so far I do feel comfortable. And this is from the center forward, Andy Rios, who started at that number 9 position for the Earthquakes on Friday evening. I know that there's some chatter here on the side, chatting about Andy Rios as well, and folks giving their opinion. Obviously, he's another player that folks are going to be divided on if you're going to play with one center forward and you have the reigning Major League Soccer record goal scorer in your ranks as well. Of course, folks are going to be divided. Let's just start with his hold-up play and his distribution. Here I thought, for me, in the first little bit, I mean, he did struggle a little bit, but once the game got going, I thought that he was okay. However, for this system, the question is this enough? And I'm not so sure that it is enough as the lone striker.
Yeah, I mean, the Quakes were caught in kind of a tough spot, to be quite honest. Danny Houston, before the game was reported as having migraines, I literally think Alex and I pushed send on that tweet at the same time. But Danny wasn't available, and what we ended up, Almeida ended up in a situation of having just the 2 strikers, and what we kind of know is that Wando was not completely ready to go for the length of time that Rios was able to go for. We know that Wando got down there and struggled with the heat a little bit, and it's possible that he wasn't ready, to be able to go 90, and that might have tipped Almeida's hand a bit. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I thought they needed Chris Wondolowski in the box, and it's unfortunate that he might not have been entirely match fit to go to start and go the full 90. I think since Seattle sat so deep, the Quakes had tons and tons of crossing opportunities. They didn't really take them. And I think that's because they could have used Wondolowski's movement in the box and his poaching abilities, especially because Rios was so quiet. His hold-up play and his poaching was almost non-existent, especially in the first half. He had 1 or 2 chances, but wasn't really able to put them away. His movement obviously isn't as strong as Wando's, so his body positioning is sometimes a little awkward in the box and off balance, which I think significantly hinders him. And that made me have one other thought that I never thought would cross my mind, but the thought that crossed my head during the second half was that I think the Quakes might need a target man. Their offense is really, really small. Even Danny Houston, who's their tallest forward, isn't a target man, and he isn't particularly strong in the air. But I think in that match, if the Quakes had a big danger man in the box, that could have given them an edge and might make other teams think twice about sitting so deep. If I think back, I think Adam John or maybe Quincy Amarqua was the last guy who actually filled that role for the Quakes. But right now they have absolutely nobody in their roster who can do that. And they're decent at set pieces going forward because Kasia and Alanis are both really strong in the air, but they're missing that presence in the regular run of play, I think.
Yeah, Joel Velez writes, I think Danny should be the lone forward since he has the speed. I know a lot of people were asking about Danny Houston prior to the game, and Daniel Zohar had asked any idea why Danny wasn't available. And Jamon, you had gotten some information right before that he had a migraine before the match.
That's right. So he was available to the media. We had talked to him just the day before, and I'm expecting that, he actually might be a really good option for the Quakes in the next game. If you just had Andy Rios go 100 minutes. I'm not quite sure what Wando's recovery rate is. He always jokes that he doesn't have any muscles, so he has nothing to strain, and he just takes the cold bath and he's good to go. It might be an opportunity to put Houston back in a number 9 role and see what he can do. And by the way, he's kind of had his way with Vancouver before. He scored a couple of really nice goals against Vancouver in the past, and it might be a team that he's got the number for. Might be a good chance to put him back in that number 9 to start the next game.
Jamon, I'm dying to hear what you think of my hot take, though. Do the Quakes need a number 9?
Do the Quakes need a number 9? Well, so Andy Rios, what I will say is that the Quakes pulled a video that literally was out there for about 5 minutes of Andy Rios hitting one of the biggest banging headers you've ever seen into a goal in preseason. And in that moment, I thought he might be able to do this. He might be able to be that kind of player you were just talking about, Alex. Unfortunately, I don't think he's been getting the service that would give us the answer to that question. I would like to see a couple more games before I answer that. So put that one on the list. We will need to come back to it.
I'll get back to you about that one, Jamon. I'll follow up.
Jesus Solorio wrote in, he said, bring Lenny back, LOL.
There you go.
Then somebody right below him, and I'm not sure this person's name, but I'm just going to refer to them as ... wrote, LOL, I saw Lenny in SF the other day. So
he pops up in the weirdest spots sometimes.
By the way, to those of you that are tuning in, you have been fantastic for this episode so far. So keep asking us questions, keep commenting. Remember that this show is your show. We are a community-based program, and we want to do a good job for you as well. So make sure that you like and you subscribe when you get a chance, and tell your friends as well about this to tune in. But without further ado, we're going to show you some video now of Magnus Eriksson after with his thoughts on the Seattle game, and then we're going to show you some video of his thoughts on the recovery process of the players as well.
Of course, we wanted to take the all 3 points, but I mean, we did our best out there. We were fit. We looked strong for 90 minutes, and I mean, it's just a corner away in the end where it could be deflected in for a win, but it feels good. The group is good, and the mentality is great. So I mean, we just keep on going here, and I have a feeling with that we're really strong. We're really strong as a group, and out there, I think that we played really well. If you look at that, we've been away for a couple of months, so I'm really happy with the guys and the performance.
So the captain was happy. He seemed pretty content with the result as well. He's always an even-keeled kind of guy, and that's how he plays as well, as we just spoke about. But I know there was a lot of hype on social media, and you could feel the energy from the Quakes in the match, especially in the first half. When they really took it to Seattle. The second half, I think the game did break down quite much more significantly. But here's the captain saying he was happy.
First of all, I think that we did a good game against Seattle. I think it was a good receipt that we have done something good during this horrible time that we've been away from each other and couldn't train. So it was a first step, and I think it was a good one. And now we go for more. I think that the feeling in the group is that we want more, and we will try to get it on Wednesday.
So Wednesday it is, and Wednesday tomorrow the Quakes take on Vancouver. Just a couple things to report as well. If you didn't know already, Chicago defeated Seattle by a scoreline of 2-1, and so they currently lead the group, and they are at the top of the group there with 3 points. 1 game played. Seattle 2 games played and just 1 point, so they're in a bit of trouble. But the Quakes versus Vancouver tomorrow, and these two teams know each other quite well. The series history will bring up the last 5 matches for you as well, just to show you a little bit. The Quakes took both matches against the Whitecaps last year, and then the previous year it was the Whitecaps with 2 victories and a tie. And then that's not noted on there is the 2017 match between the 2 teams in the playoff. But we probably don't think that that's relevant right now. But it is the Quakes versus Vancouver. A lot of folks like this, and it's an unspoken rivalry, but it is a rivalry, and it's a good one here on the West Coast, with Vancouver having their first match as well. Thoughts on tomorrow, Alex Morgan?
Yeah, Charles, I think that one playoff game was a sore spot for the Quakes. But I think they actually have the advantage going into this match. They've played a real game in Orlando now. They know what it's like out there, how draining it is in the heat, what the intensity is like. So they'll be the more prepared team because Vancouver hasn't played in 3 or 4 months. They haven't played in Orlando yet because of the schedule changes due to Nashville, Dallas dropping, and Chicago moving into Group B. And so they might have a slight tactical advantage because they'll have the element of surprise. They've seen the Quakes play, but the Quakes haven't seen them play. But I think that will be greatly outweighed by the advantages the Quakes get from being having a match under their belt.
Jamon Moore, what do you make of the fact that Chicago beat Seattle? They lead the group here, and then the Quakes go into their second match. Vancouver having their debut in this tournament.
It's, the teams are going to spin it both ways, right? Magnus is going to say, okay, we've got experience now in this tournament. We've got experience in the humidity. We know now in a second game what we need to do. Maybe we're a bit more match fit, having actually played 90 minutes. Those are all definitely advantages from the Quakes' perspective. Vancouver's going to come in rested. They're going to have seen how every other team has handled these situations, and they're going to be a little bit smarter coming in terms of what this type of heat and humidity might be doing to their squad, and seeing how Seattle handled the Earthquakes a bit. From that perspective, it's a soccer game, and what the Earthquakes are going to need to start doing now is understand that they're playing in a group stage. And in a group stage, they're going to need to make some adjustments based upon based upon what the table says. Right now, Chicago being in that first spot in the table and having the goal differential advantage means that the Quakes really need to go for the 3 points. It's not enough to walk out of this next game with a draw, and that's going to play into the decisions that they're going to make. Vancouver, on the other hand, they're not under pressure yet. They've got 3 games to go. They may not see the Quakes as the strongest opponent. They're the first opponent, and it'll be interesting to see Vancouver's particular approach with a little bit less stress than the Earthquakes have in order to get the points. That might mean that they're going to allow the Earthquakes to try to commit numbers forward and try to take advantage of that in behind. Their media was talking about their high press and how they may use that in the game. We'll kind of have to see We didn't see a lot of that type of pressing in the games last season. So, if that's something that Vancouver is doing this season, I haven't really seen much of it yet.
I don't know much about Vancouver's defensive system, but I would be surprised if they aggressively press the Quakes, given that, they're not certain how fit they are. This will be their first game in 4 or 5 months now, right? I think that given how successful Seattle were with their game plan sitting back, I certainly expect Vancouver to do that. And I think what the Quakes need to do is they need to start stronger. I think they'll be more comfortable out there, so they'll need to start with more energy and more intensity, because if they get that early goal, then that will force Vancouver to out of their shell a little bit. It'll force them to push forward, and that will create even more space in behind for the Quakes to attack and try to open up a lead.
Yeah, I think Vancouver will also sit in, very much so. Their coach, Mark Dos Santos, who was at LAFC before, and before that, he was with the San Francisco Deltas. So some folks in the Bay Area kind of know his style. Is a typically somewhat defensive-minded coach. Sometimes plays three in the back, or 5 in the back, or 3 with two outside wing backs as well. And I totally agree on your analysis. And it seems like everybody else does. Marcelo Barriga says that Vancouver is parking the bus. They're missing attacking players and no rush. Jesus Solorio, no way they press high. They're going to sit back and wait for the counter attack. But let us talk about that though, because that is important. And Mark Dos Santos teams are successful on the counter attack, and this is actually how they normally play. And we did see some of it with Seattle. And so, what kind of adjustments do you think that Matias Almeida needs to make, in this next match? Is it moving the ball quicker through the wingers? Is it any personnel changes, do you think, in order to kind of maybe combat the fact that there is that counterattacking threat?
Well, I think actually one of the commenters added an important point, which is that Vancouver will be missing a few of their star players. One in particular, Cavallini up front, who chose to stay home, and also Freddie Montero and Ricketts aren't traveling with the team either. So their offensive threat is mitigated. So I think that Almeida should take more risks going forward. There it is. Marcelo was the one who added that comment. I think that the Quakes should take more risks going forward, and maybe start Chris Wondolowski up front, or possibly Danny Husen out wide left for Vaco, maybe adding some more pace and physicality to really try to bully Vancouver in behind.
All right, we've got.
Sorry, I'm on mute there. Now I'm off. Okay. Sorry. One of the questions also was who was the biggest performers in the last game, and the shots on this particular game were quite interesting. Espinoza with 6 shots, Magnus Eriksson with 9 shots and an assist, Vaco with 10 shots, Wando had 5, Jackson Ewell with 4 shots. I can't remember any other time where Jackson Ewell shot the ball that much in a game. Even Flo Youngworth had 3 shots. So yeah, when the Quakes broke that record, Vancouver would just basically absorb pressure and force saves, but most of them kind of comfortable, longer range saves. I remember Espinoza, I think, hit the post twice in that match, and so other than those couple posts, it was a game where it took the Quakes a while to kind of get the breakthroughs, and it's difficult after seeing 2 games against Vancouver that kind of went the same way last year, and seeing them play long ball for an entire season, direct Route 1 type soccer, that all of a sudden they become like some sort of tactical masterclass. I'm not sure we can expect that from them.
Let's hear from Magnus Eriksson about how the attacking players are improving in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, I had 3, which was not the best shots in my life, but we've been away from this for a long time. I mean, it's it coming and going. And I mean, like, the more practices we have, the more shots we take in training, the better we will be. So I mean, like, the most important thing for me is that we reach these situations in game where we have the opportunity to score, which is the most important thing for me. I mean, of course, in a regular season, maybe you score 1 or 2 of these, but I mean, that's how it is, and hopefully we will make goals on these shots on Wednesday. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Let's go, Paula.
So he obviously likes his team's chances on Wednesday. He felt like they created a lot of chances. And looking back to the XG and the number of shots, and then the history of the number of shots versus this team, Jamon, what do you think of that?
I think it's a great opportunity for the Quakes to try to get some confidence back in the offense. I mean, you have to think back, right? They were scoreless last game, right? And they really haven't had much in the way of offensive punch for the season so far. And so this is going to be an opportunity for them to try to get that confidence. I think the commenters are correct here. Vancouver doesn't have the offensive punch on their side. I think they're going to sit back and try to absorb that type of pressure. And, we're going to find out, but I bet you we're going to see the Quakes pelt the net. Again, it may not be 36 shots this time. It might be 20, but I think they're going to get their chances. But a lot of what we talked about in the press conference with both Rios, and Eriksson was around generating better shots and how do they try to create better shots, and for their part, it's okay. It's our first game back. We haven't had that much time to work back together again. We're still trying to get back our rhythm, and nothing will get the rhythm back in the team like putting balls in nets. So the Quakes, if they can do that early against Vancouver, they got a good shot in getting 3 points, getting 4 in the table, and getting a nice goal differential.
I think if there's one takeaway from this show, hopefully there are many, but if there's one, it's that the defense showed up against Seattle, and now the offense needs to show up and put in a strong performance against Vancouver.
All right, we'll get to your questions in just a little bit, and keep filtering them in. Actually, we'll take one now because this is a good one. And Squad Horizon writes, if we win tomorrow, what are the chances of advancing given our possible goal differential versus Vancouver in the outcome? Jamon, the stats magician there, what are the percentages of advancing out of the group if there is a win tomorrow?
Yeah, the chances of advancing if they win tomorrow are quite high. I want to say there's something around 40%. Someone on Reddit did the calculation today. Apologies, I don't have it right in front of me, but I want to say it's close to 40%, because keep in mind that 2 teams are going to get through, and a good chance that 3 teams in some groups are going to get through, right? That's the way this tournament has been set up. And so what that means is that if the Quakes can get 4 points, I think it's going to put him in a pretty good position to find a way of getting out of the group stage at this point. And so, again, I think the pressure's on the Quakes. It's not on Vancouver. And they're going to need to walk away with the 3 points in this match, or they're going to be in a position of potentially facing Chicago with, let's say, 1 or only 2 points, and really then desperately needing the 3 points. Chicago's already got 3 points, and they're sitting pretty. Where they're at, they still get a game against Vancouver, and they have a game against the Quakes to get whatever points they can get out of those games, but they're already in a good spot. It's not going to be surprising if we get to that Chicago game, and Chicago is also just sitting back absorbing pressure. And the Quakes are in a position of having to break down yet another block of 10. That's, I think, the biggest concern is does this team have the offensive weaponry? Back to your point, Alex, about the 9 and some of the underperformance I think we kind of had offensively in the first game. people are going to need to find ways to break down Vancouver and Chicago in a way that they were unable to do against Seattle. Otherwise, the Quakes' chances of getting out of here with at least 4 points in the group stage, are going to be very difficult to come by.
Jamie, your recall is impeccable. I'm looking at the Reddit right now. Shout out to btornado14 who crunched the numbers. You were almost exactly accurate. 42% chance was what they calculated to advance outright. Of course, they could also advance with a second place tiebreak as well.
All right. And then another question. How closely are you going to monitor the goal differential? How important is the goal differential with this? Marcelo Barriga with an excellent question here, because obviously goal differential does play a part in this tournament, and how the Quakes could potentially get out of the group, or potentially if they were to be third, goal differential is a thing.
Yeah, goal differential is hugely important in any kind of tournament. Anyone who's played youth soccer on up, understands how this works, right? Goal differential can come down to the very last second, to the very last game, and the way that a team is going to play at any time is their perception of where they are at with that goal differential and points on the line. So again, it's hugely important, I think, to come into the Chicago game and be able to play loose and not feel under extreme pressure. If the Quakes can get out with, let's say, at least 3 goals and hold Vancouver to 0 or 1 at worst, it's going to help them feel, I think, fairly good coming into Chicago, that they're in a decent position from a goal position perspective to be able to go through and with enough points and enough goal differential to at least nab at one of the third place spots if it comes down to that.
Goal differential, very, very important, especially when a tournament is going on and there's a selection for third place teams, and the best third place teams. Not all third place teams, of course, go through. So goal differential, extremely important. And yes, certainly will be tuning into how that is looking, Marcelo. Okay, pivoting gears just a little bit, because we want to. We're going to talk a little bit about sports business and sports sponsorship. And obviously this year, the name Avaya is no longer on Earthquake Stadium. And just wanted to have a discussion about sponsorship within Major League Soccer and within the Bay Area, and zeroing in on this. And there was some discussion on Twitter through the Sports Business Journal that there was a potential CBD company that was maybe going to have some significant naming rights for the San Jose Earthquakes. And Noel Ramirez, credit to him, quoted this article here from the Sports Business Journal. And appreciate you, Noel, for pointing this out. In recent years, the Quakes had come to an agreement in principle with an unknown CBD brand for naming rights for the team's venue. Sources said, however, the league wouldn't budge on its policies and effectively blocked the deal. These people said. So, obviously, marijuana is legal in California, and a lot of states are moving towards legalization. And, what does that kind of look like, throughout all 50 states, and as other states advance towards the legalization, and what kind of barriers they put up as well. But it is such a very interesting bit of news that has come through, potentially a CBD sponsor or having cannabis as a sponsor. So, Alex Morgan.
Well, there are lots of different stories about the business aspect of Major League Soccer coming out of Orlando, and lots of weird stories from the MLS's back tournament. But this one, I think, is completely out of left field. Now, with that said, doing some recon, I think if you'd been researching this a year ago, you would have been able to predict this. I think this move has been coming for about a year now, because last summer, Major League Soccer allowed betting companies and liquor companies to be kit sponsors and stadium rights partners as well. So it makes sense to me, at least, that if they allow those, they should allow CBD as well. Now, personally, I don't think they should allow any of these companies, gambling companies, liquor companies, or CBD companies, to be primary kit sponsors or stadium naming rights partners. I think that cannabis, CBD, should be legalized for political and economic reasons, particularly the way that criminalization exacerbates a lot of the problems and racial injustices within the criminal justice system. But personally, I take issue with the fact that MLS might be using its platform to promote these brands. That's a moral qualm I have. And quite frankly, I don't even think it would make much sense for the Quakes, because their audience is so suburban, so family friendly. I think a lot of families who bring their kids to the game would be uncomfortable attending a match at CBD Oil Stadium. But I guess I'm not entirely surprised, given that this is a team that put Amway on their kit for 3 years.
Yeah, as a parent, I agree with Alex. I think it really does depend on how much MLS is going to rely on youth coming to their games. And one of the things that has worked extremely well in the MLS model, and this is not necessarily the way it's going to work in other countries, right? So let's keep MLS specifically in mind, because I get that liquor's on the back of uniforms in Mexico. I get that. We see a lot of betting companies on jerseys in the UK and Europe. I got it. But in America, a lot of the soccer revenue is driven through local youth players and their families who come to these games, because they're encouraged to go watch the local Major League Soccer team. And sometimes they're either given tickets or discounts to be able to go to these games. And for the markets that have done this well, this has been a really big source of revenue for MLS teams in the past. Now, the Earthquakes, used to have their own big youth club, and they used to even require their youth club players, or their academy players at least, to attend games. In some cases, they were provided tickets for that. In some cases, they were highly encouraged to buy their own, or have the parents buy tickets and the kids got a free one, or whatever the case was. So there's all kinds of different models to try to get people into stadiums. And I think the more you depend on the youth, I have to agree with Alex Morgan. I just don't think that I'm fine with them being sponsors. I think if you're a team and you're trying to set up a cannabis type sponsor as your stadium name, or on the front of your uniform, maybe a side sleeve, I can be a little bit different with, but the front of the uniform, I think you're kind of setting yourself up for some backlash. And you may have some parents who may decide that they don't want to bring their children to games where those types of things are front and center.
It does seem like a particularly relevant conversation, though, given the mini controversy about the Adidas logo on the field at MLS's back games, in that it's a part of a wider trend, I think, of MLS teams and MLS as a league finding alternative revenue sources. Look, if it brings more money to American soccer, that's obviously a good thing, right? In Latin America, all of their jerseys are decked out with an assortment of sponsors, because that's just how business is done. I just think that the league and the Quakes could do a better job leveraging their existing revenue streams, traditional revenue streams, like the league's TV rights deal, which at $90 million a year seems abysmal to me, let's face it. And for the Quakes, it's their shirt sponsor and their stadium sponsor. We obviously don't know the terms of their kit deal with Intermedia, but I can't imagine it's substantial compared to the figures that other teams in the league are seeing, given that Intermedia are a pretty niche company. Definitely was, from our perspective, an underwhelming announcement. And then the fact that the Quakes can't secure a naming rights partner for the stadium, even though they're located at the heart of Silicon Valley, is absolutely embarrassing, even more so considering that their former president, Tom Fox, was brought in specifically to do those types of commercial deals. That was his specialty. He focused purely on the commercial business side rather than the soccer side of the operation. But he left over the offseason, I think. We don't know exactly why he left, but I have to imagine that his inability to secure these big name sponsorships was one of his failures. And actually, for MLS back, there is some good news, because for MLS is back, the Quakes succeeded in securing 2 more shirt sponsors for the sleeves of their kit, Wells Fargo and Clover. So that's a step in the right direction. But it seems to me obvious that the commercial side of their business has to be struggling, given that the front office has failed to find these big name sponsors.
Well, let's be honest about the kind of tone that MLS is. And I think within the current framework of Major League Soccer, it has changed so much in the last 25 years, and it pivoted in many different directions. It has been a predominantly youth soccer oriented ticket sales from the top down industry. And when new salespeople get trained, they go to a national sales center, or with some clubs that are struggling, they are able to pull folks from a national sales center. Backstory for those of you that are tuning in: I used to work for the Earthquakes in ticket sales and sponsorship. As you can tell, I wasn't that successful at it, but it is season tickets that are the most popular deals. And for me, and I'm going to be fairly biased, and someone that's also involved in lower league football as well, is it's about the local markets only. And here's why. You're seeing, this virus sweep the country, and there is more of a tune and an attitude to elevating local businesses. And while a local business, not all of them are going to afford a jersey sponsorship of $1 million or a stadium sponsorship of $5 to $10 million, it's still in the local sponsors. And I think, given the factors that MLS has changed so many times, I think it's very hard to get sponsors for this league. I'll just be honest with you. It is. It's hard because of the fact that, each franchise or each club has its own ability to do what it wants, and it should tap into its local market. And if a CBD sponsor wants to be involved with the Earthquakes, I do believe it should. I do also agree with you, lads, that a potential stadium sponsorship could be problematic, but with the right messaging and with the right PR, and the potential money that's coming from it, I think it could be something that could be nestled into the club as part of it. And obviously, I think a lot of people will change their opinion and change their tone as more states go towards legalization. And I'm not sure the polling currently in the country, when it comes to legalization. But I do see a trend where obviously a lot of states are moving towards that model. And I do think that focusing local can only be a good thing, and keeping to double down locally. To your point, Alex, about chatting about John Fox and sponsorship deals and such, I think it's also very hard in the Bay Area to get sponsors for local sports teams. Also, I've done that before and been involved with San Francisco City FC in trying to do that. To be honest, I think a lot of these big businesses want to go to the Giants, want to go to the Warriors, want to go to the Niners specifically. And there is a lot. There's a lot of different teams here, and there's such saturation of the market would be my answer to that. It sounds maybe like an excuse because obviously, as Kevin Portillo writes, he would like to see Apple Stadium with a couple of laughing emojis, which, or I Arena from Jesus Solorio. But I do think that the work can be very, very hard, specifically on the sponsorship side, given the fact that the Bay Area is so large and very saturated when it comes to the sports market. And Roku Park does sound appealing as well, Squad Horizon. So I've got a lot of opinions, of course, on this, but I think keeping it local, but and finding ways to create connections through the supporters, through people that come to games that work for XYZ tech company, or work for a health company. Obviously, Sutter Health was the sponsor for a little bit, but now they're the sponsor of just the academy sides. And Kaiser Permanente is the health sponsor of the Warriors. So you kind of have your health sponsor, you kind of have your bank sponsor. The Quakes have Wells Fargo with their bank. If you look at the Giants, they've got Bank of America, which is huge with them, and they do a lot of work with them. And so some of these
and Chase as well for the Giants, or sorry, for the Warriors.
Yeah, and Chase for the Warriors. So some of these big institutions, it's very, very hard to get into and to try to do the work. And yeah, of course, I think that there should be, the stadium should have a name. Of course, I think that. I would just say the work is extremely, extremely difficult. It might sound like a cop-out to folks listening or to you, but I do think that it is very, very hard to make these kinds of deals happen as well.
We did hear from Jared Sholl that he was, and this was part of an interview that we did after the intermedia naming rights were announced. He did say that the next thing that they were going to turn their attention to was in getting the sleeve sponsors, but that at the same time they were working toward the bigger deal, which was for the stadium. I think the whole situation here with COVID-19 and such, and not really being able to play games in a stadium with fans, and probably not for the rest of the season, and while from their perspective probably takes the stress off of the naming rights, and it may be something that they are wanting to see if they can get the best deal possible on. We don't know. They're not telling us where they're standing, other than that they're progressing, and they've got companies that they're talking to. So but I think the sleeve sponsorship is something that not everyone has done, and I do want to give kudos to the team, Jared Sholl and his team who put those deals together to get those sleeve naming rights done. That is money in the pocket of the club, and any revenue at this point, given there's no fans in the stands, is important.
I would agree, and I'm impressed with I like Roku Park, I like iArena, I like Apple Stadium. I think those are good ideas. The only thing I would add is that I think it's a little weird, Charles, to draw the distinction between local companies and international companies, given that so many large corporations are based in the Bay Area, right? Because Apple is a local company that is also one of the biggest international brands, Google, Facebook as well. So that distinction seems a little weird to me, but yeah, I agree with you, Jamon, in that it's probably going to be a while before we see a stadium sponsor, given the fact that we don't know when the Quakes will play in Avaya Stadium with fans again.
Yeah, what are you offering to them? The flyovers from SJC? Like, what are they going to get out of naming a stadium and paying you money at this point? If I was the potential stadium sponsor, I'd be waiting to make sure there's games being played there first.
I actually didn't even think about that aspect. It's a giant billboard in front of SJC. That has to be a draw for some of these corporations.
Yeah, it's worth something. Maybe not the money that the Quakes want, though.
Okay, Marcelo Barriga said local construction companies is a good one. Many of the workers are soccer fans already. If you guys have some other comments, please pop that in to the chat. Let's take a couple questions here before we go off the air. Ooh, let's see. You guys have had some really good questions this evening, but I'm going to scroll back all the way up to the top.
I think we got a couple on Twitter we were going to pull as well, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Let's actually go to that Twitter question from our friend Matt. Everyone talks about how deep and versatile the squad is, but last season we saw Pelado stick with his guys and hardly rotated even down the stretch when they looked tired. Do you think he sticks with his guys now and uses 5 subs, or that he rotates his 11? What should he do?
Well, I think you guys probably know I'm a bit of a fan of Bobby Warshaw and kind of what he brings around MLS. I was happy we were able to get him on the show last week. He put out a really interesting take back when he was with MLSsoccer.com, and I think it's one that's worth considering. He says that, in soccer, we think about putting our best players on the field at the beginning of the game. You want them there from minute one. But yet so many games are really kind of decided in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Why don't teams think differently? Why not put some of those second level type players in at the beginning and bring your strongest players on for, 15 to 30 minutes at the end and give it all they got? Imagine if you had, let's say, Christian Espinoza coming off the bench, right, for the Quakes with his type of pace and energy. And I think you get a little bit of that with Cade Cowell, so that's a great thing, as Cade develops as a player. But it's a really interesting thought, and I think there's an opportunity in this type of environment to do something along those lines. Why not start Cade Cowell and then bring in Vaco off the bench? Why not play someone else at the 8 or the 10, then Eriksson and Yule, and then bring them on, if that's what you want. So I think there's opportunities to do something like
that. I actually like that idea. I like the idea of starting Cade Cowell out left and then introducing Vaco later in the game when there's more space, and he might be able to create more chances. I think that Matthias is probably reluctant to significantly change his starting lineup because the man marking system that he employs in defense requires so much communication and so much fluency between the players, so much understanding. So I think that's one of the barriers to this sort of squad rotation that you're talking about, Jamon. So I don't anticipate any major changes on Wednesday against Vancouver, other than maybe Danny Husen coming on in place of Rios or Vaco. But with that said, I would like to see them explore more strategies like that in the future.
Yeah, and also with the cramping situations, I think we've kind of seen there may be limits for some of these players in this type of heat and humidity for how long they're going to be able to go with their current level of fitness, right? Do we think right now that at the center back position that we're going to be able to have two center backs go 100 minutes? I don't think so. In fact, I'm a little bit concerned that Almeida used his subs a little bit early and potentially put the Quakes in a really dangerous situation at the end of the game. A couple of those subs, take like the Fierro sub, probably unnecessary, right? So I think he's going to really need to think a little bit more strategically about when he's holding those subs for, and make sure that you've got the ability to do at least an emergency sub at the end of the game. I'm not sure that fully answers, the question we were asked. Bobby was on here last week saying how deep the squad is. I do think there are options available for Almeida that wouldn't bring the team down all that much, and frankly would probably give Vancouver a bit of a different look than they're planning for. I think when you can predict what the starting 11 is for a team, you probably are halfway to being able to have a game plan to be able to beat them.
And looking at the bench, I think there are a couple obvious subs. Danny, we assume, will be returning to the 18, so he will be one of the players we expect to see. I think Shea Salinas.
We got the 23 now.
Right, they have more available subs because of the COVID changes. So Danny, I think we'll expect to see Shea Salinas, Chris Wondolowski, Florian Youngworth, Cade Cowell. I think all make sense. So those would be the 5 I would expect, but I think that they should also save a substitution in case they have a late injury, so, particularly for a defensive player.
Yeah, or just more cramping.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Vikos wrote to us early in the show, and he said Cade left, Vaco central, and Espinosa right would be a dream. Next question comes from Squad Horizon. With Chicago's win versus Seattle, are we underestimating Chicago's talent for the game on the 19th? Jamon, you're slightly nodding your head, but I cannot see it in my little 1 inch by 2 inch little square of you. But go ahead, lad.
Well, I think they showed today that that they're going to be someone to reckon with in the group, at least, right? You can look at that squad and go, they lost a lot of their kind of potent offensive attack. They lost Alexander Katai, right? And they lost some of their scoring threats from the last couple of seasons. But one of the things that is interesting is that they got younger. And sometimes with that youth comes opportunity for players who are hungry enough to be able to use a stage like they did today. And you saw a good bit of that against the Seattle Sounders. I think writing them off just because they're young is a big mistake. That may actually play in their favor in a tournament like this, because those young legs might be able to withstand the rigors of the tournament better than some of the older legs that the Quakes have on their side.
And I'm sure that we will hopefully be able to talk more about the Chicago matchup in our next show. But I would add that they lost 2-1 to Seattle in the opening game of their season, and then just beat Seattle 2-1. So obviously that's a marked improvement, and I think the Quakes should be wary.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys there. Daniel Zohar, can Flo get in the starting lineup?
Yeah, absolutely. Flo can get in the lineup if Almeida decides that he feels either Kasia or Alanis are not fit to be able to go, as long as he thinks that a starter in the center back position's going to do. I mean, let's be honest. I think coming into a game, it's not ideal to expect you're going to use one of your 5 subs on a center back position. I think Flo's pretty hungry right now to be able to, prove himself again. We saw what he did when he came in last season, hungry to prove himself. I think everyone loves the energy that Flo does bring. He is prone to the occasional mistake. So is Kasia. Alanis hasn't been perfect either. But I would like to see a bit of rotation among those 3 players in this tournament. Flo can play either side. So let's flex him. Let's use him. Let's give a break if Kasia needs to get his legs back, or if Alanis does. Absolutely very comfortable with Flo being in there for either one of them. And
he can also play in the midfield. His favored position, I think, at least it was last season and before Almeida came, was in the defensive midfield role. So seems to me like the perfect versatile defensive player that they can bring in wherever they need, depending on the situation. I mean, the thing about Flo is that he's always hungry, right? He brings such infectious energy to the pitch. So I definitely think we'll see him, but I doubt he starts unless there are serious fitness issues about Alanis or Kasia, just because Alanis and Kasia seem to have the better partnership.
Marcelo Barriga says Napoli does a similar thing with Chucky Lozano, bringing a speedy winger on in the second half, probably referring to Cade Cowell there. Wanted to bring that up because that is the football romanticism quote of the night. Of course, Chucky Lozano in that wonderful match for Mexico versus Germany in the World Cup in 2018, and Napoli, winners of the Italian Cup this season as well, defeating Juventus in penalties, in case you guys didn't know. As well, Jesus Solorio says, I want Jack Scahan to get some minutes in his first game with Reno before he looked amazing. Will we see a Beeson? Will we see a Scahan? Will we see some of these other names? Alex Morgan, you are shaking your head. Why?
Yeah, I said this last week. I don't think we're going to see either of them get minutes, or at least not significant minutes, just because I think the Quakes have options ahead of them. They have good options ahead of them. Flo in the midfield. You're going to have one more attacker now that Danny's going to be returning, and I just don't anticipate that Matthias is ready to use them in such critical games at this point.
I think if the Quakes can get assured that they're going to go through, I think with the Vancouver a really good performance against Vancouver. The chance that you're going to maybe see Jack Scahan get to show a little bit in the midfield's a bit higher. Tanner Beeson, though, behind Flo, it's unlikely unless they get such a big advantage, in the group that it's literally no risk to put him in.
Squad Horizon is giving us another gem of the evening. These gems just keep coming, everybody. You guys are doing.
Everyone else is on their game today.
Yeah, Squad Horizon is really on the game. Jesus Solorio also on game today, and
Marcelo as well.
I feel like I should give out a couple favorite commenter awards, and maybe we can get those beer koozies made quicker, sooner rather than later, and send them out to some of you guys as well. But Squad Horizon said he'd like to see would like to see Andrew Wiebe with us on the show. Quarantining in California, he would be a great collab. Of course, we had Bobby Warshaw on the show last week. Joel Soria is taking a break. He will be back with us on the show, so don't worry. He's doing okay. We have chatted with him, just taking a break again as well, but he will join back with the team. Well, I think that's our show for this evening. Just wanted to appreciate everybody for tuning in to the program. We are Black and Azul. This is episode number 43. My name is Charles Wollin. Alex Morgan, final thoughts for this evening?
Yeah, I'm excited for tomorrow's game. The Quakes have something to play for against Vancouver. If they can get a result, they should be sitting top of Group B. If they can, if their offense can show up, I think if they start the game with a lot of energy, they can catch Vancouver off guard, and that will put them in a good position for this tournament.
You have to play to the group. You have to see how the results are going. You have to make decisions based upon that. You've got to play to get out of the group. Almeida, I think, knows how to do that. He's got that cup experience at the World Cup level. He's got it obviously in Mexico and Argentina as well. I think he's going to play pretty smart here, and I'm just quite interested to see, what he thinks the pieces are going to be. That's going to be able to get them over the hump, and hoping for more time from people like Cade Cowell, so we can get even a better sense of what he's capable of doing.
Big match tomorrow as tournament play continues for the San Jose Earthquakes in the MLS is back tournament, taking on the Vancouver Whitecaps. Somewhat a fun recent rival here on the West Coast. Kickoff tomorrow is at 6 p.m. Our next show, well, we'll see. We'll just keep you guys. We'll keep you guys on your toes. And let you know. I do want to shout out to our producer, Jason Sholl, who has been absolutely terrific tonight, dealing with me putting in your guys' comments as I talk right away. I don't know if he's able to reveal himself, but I think he should reveal himself and say hi. There he is. There's Jason.
For the first time on Black and Azul that he's been seen.
But Jason seriously is the glue that puts this show together, and it's because of his leadership and his wonderful just heart building the show, building a studio in his own home, and being able to do this as we are doing this social distanced from our own houses for these next few months with these shows. But want to thank you, Jason, for such extraordinary leadership. You inspire me and the rest of the team.
You're very welcome, guys.
He talks too.
So Jason Sholl, Aaron Sholl, his brother, who is part of the Fin Factor, who helped bring the idea of this show together. Jamon Moore, Alex Morgan, Joel Soria. I'm Charles Wollin. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. Stay safe, everybody. Reach out, please, to us on Twitter, and we'll see you back here for our next show. Take care.